Broadcasting live from the Phoenix Business Radio X studio in Tempe, Arizona. You are tuning in to Culture Crush with Kendra Maples. This podcast will dive into a variety of companies that are crushing it with a great company culture.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Culture Crush Business Podcast. On this podcast, we focus on everything surrounding businesses with a good company culture. We deep dive into companies that are striving and crushing it with a great culture, as well as companies that are out there to support that growth as well. It is definitely time to kick off the summer and spark some of these very authentic and valuable conversations. And the two individuals in the room today will absolutely do this. I have a feeling I will say very little today because this conversation is going to be very authentic and jam-packed. So I am very excited to introduce our two guests today. Today we have Christine Rogers, President and COO of Aspireship. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yay. And we have Andrew Kolikoff, Leadership and Culture Coach for Aurelius. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yay. I'm so excited. I think I've had conversations with, Andrew for sure for a while about bringing you onto the show and having these conversations. And Christine, you and I had talked a long time ago, but I do want to bring up something that ties into this whole conversation of culture, just to start it off. I was actually having conversations with another one of your team members about being on the show. And then she approached me and said, hey, I think it'd be best to have Christine on the show. I'm actually leaving the company. And my heart was like, gah. And I asked point blank, can I ask why you're leaving the company? Does it have to do with the culture? Because if I'm highlighting the company on this show, I would really like to know. And right away, she said, oh my goodness, absolutely not even close. I just need some personal growth in space that this company is smaller, right? It doesn't have all of the positions that I'm ready to fill. And she made so positive that she made sure that I knew that it absolutely had nothing to do with the culture. She said, I wish I could stay here forever, but I need to maybe go somewhere else and grow and then come back again. But I thought that was really, really neat, especially jumping into this. It's part of that culture. She is leaving, but she is already a spokesperson for you guys and, you know, highlighting and being a rep for the amazing company culture that you guys are growing. So
I know you back channeled me, but I love it.
You're off the hook.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's interesting that you brought that up. So she and I have been talking for, quite a few months about kind of her journey and her path and what she wants. And, at the end of the day, she just said about 6 weeks ago, I don't want to sell anymore.
Yeah.
And I said, well, that's the role. Like, that's the role that I need, and I don't have what you're looking for right now. We're a smaller company. We just don't have that. And so I just said, but like, what can I do to help? And so we just started co-creating what that would look like. And so I think it's interesting because just last week, it's funny that you brought this up. We were like, okay, it's time to tell the team. We already had a timeline set in place. She said, I still don't have a job. I want to go to LinkedIn and say, this is what I'm looking for. And I said, I've actually never seen this done before. We're like, you're going to still be working for me. I'm going to publicly support you in looking for your new role. And let's figure out how we can craft this together so that you get the support from LinkedIn that you need. And everybody can see, my entire network can see, I'm fully supportive of this. And I'm not upset. Last Friday, I do too, because I was like, last Friday she told our team first, and then she sent me what she was going to post on LinkedIn so that I knew what she was going to say. And she said, it was a beautiful post and said, if there was any way I could stay, I would, because I love this company and I love, who everyone is. And if it ever is the conversation around people leave a leader, this isn't it. And she said that this is me saying my passion is not here. So she boldly said and bravely said, I do not want to do sales, but here is what I'm looking for. And if you are looking for someone like me, I'm looking for you too. And then I was able to come under and say, and I am amplifying this message because she's amazing. And if anybody needs me to do anything, losing people, it never feels good. But like, if we can show how to do this in a way that maybe has never been done before. And also, she's still working for me till the beginning of June.
Yeah.
And we're working together. We're closing deals. We're doing business. She's fully present in what we're doing. And I'm fully supportive of her next position. So like, it was very different. We were both like, I've never really seen this done. I don't know if we can create something new where people don't hide and don't give a 2 weeks notice and don't feel shamed and have a lot of, where other people know, but then your leader doesn't know till the end. And then it's a big, and so if we can figure out how to do a better job at when people leave, like what a better way to show love and care than to like support and amplify their story and their journey, because she is always going to be my person. She's not leaving me. We're just taking halftime. And, and people stay with you long past their current career if there's actual genuine relationship. I believe that.
Yep. And Daryl's heard me talk in this studio a number of times about the offboarding process and how important that is. And if that offboarding process can start even earlier and you guys can be an example, then it's just going to make life and business and everything so much better. And I love this.
It deepens trust and honesty.
Yeah.
And people will be honest with you about how they really feel.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I got so excited and I had myself. So on this note of her doing sales, will you tell us a little bit about Aspireship? Give us the snapshot of what you guys do.
Sure. So we help individuals that want to get into software selling, but we have an online course that is available for anyone who wants to take. And then if they can complete the course and pass it, we will introduce them to companies that are looking for competency and character versus bullet points on a resume. Yeah. Attitude and aptitude. Like that is what's important rather than their quote experience or what they've done that will show that they're experienced. We want them to actually be able to learn, grow, develop, show their competency in a way that companies are relating to, and then that's what we do. So we're kind of where enablement and training meets recruiting. So our partners are who we work with, and our grads are who we work with. So it's a kind of two-sided-ish marketplace.
Yeah, a very cool space to fill.
Yeah.
A very cool space.
Yeah.
And obviously you're here today because of the culture side. We already got a little bit of the insight talking about one of your folks that's leaving. And I really hope that is an example of how companies can start to support their staff when they leave. Because Andrew, you said it, no one wants to say anything, right? You apply for a job and they've got that little checkbox of, can we reach out to your current employer? And it's like, gah. And think about how many people check no because they don't want their current employer to know because they feel there's going to be backlash and whatnot. And so if this can be an example of how that offboarding process can be successful, then it makes your job.
Well, I mean, if you noticed what was critical in the conversation was Christine, right? She runs the company. She's the president and COO. And because of who she is, she's creating the environment for people to feel safe. That's really what it takes to build a great culture. It's something I always say is that you have to be the change you want to see in your company, right? So if you know Christine, that is who she is. She's willing to be vulnerable, open, question herself, and move herself to a better place in front of others to see.
Well, I appreciate that very much.
But I mean, that really is who you are. So then think about the environment and the culture that creates. I can go into a company, deal with somebody who's not half the human being she is, and it makes my job really hard. If they're not willing to see themselves for who they are and the ripple effect of a stone in the pond that's created from that leader, then there's really little that a consultant like me can do.
So on that note, tell us more about what you do.
What do you want to know?
Tell us what you do.
Well, I'm a leadership development culture coach. Aurelius is a company that provides a whole host of services in operations, in finance, but we also apply behavior change to that strategic deployment. Most consultants you hire a consultant, they work strategically, but they don't usually do the grunt work. That grunt work is the behavioral change from the strategy, right? And I realized by accident, and being a consultant as long as I have been, that I was doing that. I was working to change the behavior of the organization to match the strategy. And I thought all consultants did that, only to realize, well, wait a minute.
No,
I'm weird.
Yeah.
And that for it, any consulting work really to stick, you've got to change the behavior, and the culture a bit to match that strategy for what they brought you in to do. So, I mean, effectively, that is what and who Aurelius is.
And when you come in and help and support a company that needs that growth and needs that coaching and whatnot, what does that look like as far as, is the timeline different? Is, the connection that you have, are you there sitting with them X amount of days? Like, what does that part of the
So
picture
I
look
have
like?
process just like everybody else needs to have process,
Yes.
but there's also a personal development process that needs to kind of take on its own life in my work with the leader of the company. And there's this delicate balance in trying to get somebody to follow a path and allowing them to follow the path. And, that kind of takes, for me, it's about being present and knowing when I need to force and knowing when I need to give time and allow. So I'm sorry that I'm not providing specifics
You're
for
good.
you, but
You're
that
good.
would be the 10,000
Yeah.
feet up. There absolutely are steps and methods that we will take a company through, but that leader needs to also grow and see themselves for who they are and why they are before they do grow. And sometimes that onion can have many layers, right?
Yep.
And sometimes
all times
all
on.
time, right? And then sometimes
always
the
an
more
onion.
the
That's right.
layers,
That's right.
Kendra, the more time it takes for me to have the patience to allow for that process to happen before I start jamming, well, this is how we have to do it.
Yeah.
So, it really takes somebody who really understands people individually. People ask me, how do you change a culture? And I always say one soul at a time. And that's really what it is. It's one soul at a time. I'm not in the instant gratification business. You can hire somebody to do, and I love accountants, but accountants' work is very black and white, right? And sometimes you can do it very quickly. Behavioral change, seeing yourself for who you are, seeing the truth of what your company culture is for what it is, sometimes can take time.
Yeah.
It is not the instant gratification business.
And the whole process is going to be obviously different if you have a leader like Christine, who already you're setting the bar higher, right? From the conversation we started off at the beginning, supporting your staff member to leave and understanding that, like you said, it's just a halftime, right? It's just a pause in that relationship. She'll come back. She'll join Aspireship again with you guys. But in order to help her, you are understanding and recognizing that what she needs just isn't with you guys right now. And that in itself, that's huge for you as a leader because, and Andrew, like you said, you change one soul at a time, but a lot of times that soul has to be the very top. It's got to be that.
It's where it starts.
That onion peeling right at the very top. And so, Christine, you're already setting that bar And you would probably make Andrew's job really easy.
Well, I mean, knowing Christine the way I do, she in her head is like, how can I be better? How can I do more? What can I do to raise it above what I already know? Because she knows that she only knows what she knows. And there's all that she doesn't know about what she doesn't know, you know? And that's really what it takes to really build a great culture, is to always be open, to have somebody always kind of pushing you and opening your eyes to new things, to make it, you know, to see new pathways. You know, what I always say is most people that have a very good culture and value culture as one of their top priorities, my personal belief is that has to be their full-time work. If culture is that top priority, it usually in most organizations is somebody's part-time work. But if it's a top priority, it has to be somebody's full-time work, and it has to be their talent. And I wish I saw more companies that did that, but that is a cost, right? But there's so much evidence that cost is really an investment.
Absolutely.
Because of the rewards that are reaped.
And I also think in that same vein, so first of all, I immediately feel like bad that I've done this so poorly before. That's why I think you learn, and I would just want to call that out, because it makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable with just the glorification of this. And for my own personal thing, this is one of those things where it's I've learned I remember the first time one of my top employees came and said, I'm going to leave. And I was like, I took it so personally. I've invested so much. I've done so many. I love you. I love you and you love me. What's happening right now? And all of the investment and the time. And it's really hard to not feel that. And only with repetition and intentionality and also, focus, where as you're starting, my brain, your brain, everybody starts to, as the conversation's happening, it's going very fast. And you're like, I'm trying not to react. I'm just trying to sit here and be calm. And I'm going to force these words out of my mouth because I know I mean them. But in this moment, my physicality is agitation. And so just, I guess, expressing our humanness and in our full expression, also being able to stop for a minute and just say I love you. I want to support you.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, that is true. It is 100% true. Yep. And in those moments, I have found those defining moments, that's when it matters what the words that come out of your mouth matter in those moments, because you can sit here and say, those are the moments people remember. They're the moments that you remember. If you think back on your leadership career, you're going to sit here and think I remember when shit started to hit the fan and everything went crazy. And I remember how poorly she showed up and was, reactive and pensive and agitated. Or people can go in that moment, I felt her passion and also her love.
So she just gave some of the greatest leadership advice that anybody can give, because people, I'm in the leadership business and development business. And I often tell people, when something happens, when the shit hits the fan, you need to ask yourself, what would Jesus do? What would the Dalai Lama do? What would Gandhi do right now? And that's who you need to be. That's who you need to be, because that, I promise you, you will be giving your best, and the best outcome will happen from it.
Yep.
So you learned how to do that. Yay for you.
Well, and also, if you're not ready in that moment, just say, ooh, I'm not ready for this. I need a minute. I'm going to need a minute. I need to think about this. I think that so many times when we're getting ready to do or say something that's going to be tough, something that we can say is, this is going to be a hard conversation. And guess what? Then it prepares everybody differently. Just saying, this is going to feel very formal right now because today is your last day. And it doesn't mean I don't love you, but this is what it is. And so I need to do some things that are going to feel really formal. And then we can have a different conversation after, but I need you to look at this paperwork.
Yeah.
If you can set the table in a way that allows people to prepare themselves, even if it's like 1 to 2 seconds, they can adjust a little bit. And I think we just yesterday on LinkedIn, I commented on a post around transparency and which is, when is too much and when's, you can say too much and cause fear, but then you can also smile and then lay everybody off in 15 minutes. Yeah. And so like, what is the right balance? And I don't know what the right balance is. All I know is like every time I've had a hard conversation, if I start it with, this is going to be a tough one. This is going to be a tough one.
Yeah.
Then it changes the tone a bit to allow for us to prepare and also for them to know that like, I'm probably not going to be perfect in it. And you're probably not going to be perfect in this conversation, but we're going to do our best.
Right.
And
it's okay to start the conversation that way. You read and, listen to things about relationship and how do you deal with conflict in a relationship. And if you get into an argument and I'm that person, I need to step away, give me 5 minutes, let me breathe, and then I'll come back. Otherwise, if we continue right now, World War III is about to go down.
Sure.
And so why can't it be the same in the workplace? Why can't you say, let's take a moment. It's going to be a hard conversation.
Of pause.
Yeah.
If you ever get an email from somebody that challenges your character, but you feel like it challenges your character, and if you respond right away, your answer will not be an empowered answer. It will be a painful, the pain that you feel answer. I always tell people, pause, wait a day. And then if you write it, you can't believe that it's so different through that pause. Marcus Aurelius, my company is named after Marcus Aurelius. He used to play this game with himself called the equanimity game. And he knew that when he showed up, he would get himself ready to be in his best place for the day. And, no offense, but you think running Aspireship is hard, but running Rome is probably a little bit harder. And so you want to talk about shit hitting the fan, right? And he knew that he was human and he would be knocked off his best place.
Right.
That people would challenge who he was and he would be over here. But he knew that in this less empowered place, Rome didn't love him as much. He didn't get as much done. He wasn't as effective, and he would get himself, we talked about pause. He would practice getting to that empowered place faster and faster and faster rather than just wait a day. So that's some of the things that I teach is like, Andrew, tell me about tips and tricks. What can I do? Well, there's one right there, right? Play the equanimity game with yourself. Yes, you need to pause, but you can actually practice getting back faster and faster.
And especially when you are in the CEO position, right? Having those difficult conversations, because that position, people tend to forget sometimes that's a very lonely spot to be because you are in charge of overseeing, right? The culture of the company, that balance of transparency, making sure everyone's paid, making sure they can put food on the table for their families. You have a lot of pressure as that leader on your shoulders. And so when that person comes and has that conversation to say that they're going to leave right before taking that pause, your head is like, oh shit, right? Because then you're thinking, okay, they're leaving. I'm losing this person. I have to replace them. And all of that is going through your head and needing to pause and have that response for supporting them. Because like you said, they will remember. I remember conversations I had with leaders 20 years ago, like it was yesterday, because it didn't go well. Many of those, and that's why it's stuck. So that says a lot too with that being human, learning, understanding, taking that pause, but then putting it that moment to support that other person, right? And then later on you go, oh shit.
Well, here's another way to look at it. I view challenging moments, that is the greatest opportunity. not when you're winning. It's the challenging moment is where opportunity shows up and how you be and how you navigate through it. If you lose the World Series and you're watching them all like jump on each other on the field, you're trying to figure out a way how to be there next year, right? The ones on the field are just celebrating and, enjoying the moment. So that is the opportunity right there, So if everybody could look at when shit does hit the fan, that actually is important. That is the opportunity for you to grow and to figure out how to navigate through it. That is, and what she does is she exercises her courage in being honest. Right. And that's that's Christine's way is, okay, I'm going to just be completely honest rather than duplicity like there is inside of companies or passive aggressiveness inside of companies. She doesn't do that.
The other thing I think that's hard about this is these are surprises. Right. If like as a leader, when you are, you're the one that is putting the agenda together about what's going to happen, that's hard. You have the time. You have the time to think about it. You have the time to craft the messaging. It's the moments that you're having an all hands meeting and somebody asks a really sharp question and you're like, oh, really? You want to do that right now? You want to do that right now in front of this 150 people? Like, I am going to level you. This is like, those are the moments, right? Where then you're stuck and you're thinking to yourself, how do I show up right now? And there are moments when you need to assert more authority and say like, that question seems a little personal. We can definitely take that offline. And there are moments where you could, there are different ways to adjust. But I have found my most poignant learning moments have been in surprise.
Yeah.
And it's not when I'm planning something or when I have to roll out a different comp structure and a commission plan that is not going to benefit you. That's not when it happens because I actually know what that's going to look like for the most part. I know what the sentiment is going to be. I know what the questions are going to be. I know the concerns. I have those conversations ready to go. What it is when there are surprises. And I think those are the moments where you do have to have a level of presence and kind of agility in the moment and also awareness to say like, right now, everybody's looking at my body language that is saying something different, And so that is when I have found it's okay to say, ooh, that was a little bitey, wasn't it? And then, everybody kind of laughs, gives me a second to think. And then I decide what's next. What's next now?
Yeah.
How do I adjust? How do I do this? Because in this moment, it will matter later. It will matter.
Yeah.
It'll matter now. It'll matter later. And people like my public perception and who I am is defined in all of those moments. That's why it's so hard to be a leader because everybody's watching you all the time. And when you mess up, because it's going to be, the more you can, I think, lean into like, wow, I did that poorly. Actually, I everything I just said in this last 10 seconds was just ignore that. Let me start all over. I wasn't ready for that. That's super important, I think, just to be a human in this and be like, actually, I hadn't even thought of that. That was a really great question. You took me a little by surprise,
So I love just listening to her because what she just said is something that really helps me is, we judge ourselves through our intentions, but others judge us through our behavior.
Yeah.
And what you just said was, your intentions, but then you looked at your behavior because that's how you're seen.
Yeah.
Right? You're seen by your intentions, yes, but you're more seen by your behavior. But that's how we see ourselves, right? Yeah. So, this is a deep thinking, feeling woman over here that understands, being a leader really is not easy. And it really requires to do it right, a lot of knowing yourself.
And it's not something that is always innate and, natural for people. And for leaders, some people just kind of naturally fall into that place of honesty and trust and sincerity. And for others, they truly have to work at it, right? So the fact that you mention what you're thinking, what you're saying, your behavior, right? They're going to see your behavior. I've had this conversation with the 12-year-old numerous times of, I know you said okay, but your body and the tone that you said it in pretty much said F you. Very different things not matching up, right? So that's a piece of it. And then the piece that I feel like people forget is, right, we're human. If you need to say, oh, what I just said is not really what I meant to say, then be human and say that. Or tell somebody that you don't know. Again, back to kind of that kid example. I am that parent, that aunt, that, godmother that's always been the one. I'm going to give you the brutal, honest truth. And if you ask a question and I don't know it, guess what? I'm going to tell you I don't know. I'm not going to bullshit you and make up some answer. Like when you walk around the zoo and you have parents all the time, the kid's like, what's that animal? They make up the animal. And they're like, oh, it's a cheetah. I'm like, instant my animal behavior side is like, it's a jaguar, you idiot. Don't tell your... But if you don't know, just say you don't know. Or if you said it and you're like, oh, that wasn't what I should have said, then just admit that, say that, be human, be authentic. But with that being said, right, it's not something that comes natural to everybody and in that leadership position. So my question for the two of you in this is, are there ways, like how can you support, give advice? How can leaders learn to be more authentic or learn to build trust in their business? Are there even ways to give these guiding?
You want to go?
You go first. I have a couple.
Okay, so I had a client who owned a pretty sizable company. And the first meeting I had with him one-on-one, he said to me, I've never known how to trust anyone. And I took a deep breath and I was like, okay, this is going to be a wild ride, in my head. Because if you can't trust anyone, how's anybody going to trust you? Right? So, and the short answer to your question, Christine already gave you. It's character and competence. And there was an example of an onion with many layers because his personal life had so many incredible hardships in it. He was even actually homeless for a while.
Wow.
His mother was murdered. So this was a leader that went through a lot as a person. And let it be known that every leader has their own personal life that they bring into the leadership of the company. So that's something that really, there's an example of something that just is going to take time for us to go back. And that's really more coaching than it is culture. Leadership development and coaching, for us to go back, for him to rewrite his own story. Him being attached to that story was who he became. He, in a way, was a victim of his life and his story. And it was my job to decouple his attachment to that story and rewrite a new story. So you can't just say, well, dude, you got to trust them, because he already has this whole life story that he's not just going to let go of it. So every situation is different. You really, in the business that I'm in, I have this weird gift that I make people feel safe because I'm not going to judge them. I'm
true.
just going to... What?
It's very true.
Thank
you.
You
have a sense, there is zero judgment with you.
I won't.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to put love on you, and I'm going to try to serve. I live my life in service. I'm going to try to serve and figure out how to do that. And that is really the magic in how to get people to open up and to rewrite that story. So I don't know if that answered your question.
It does. And it's interesting because I'm thinking of, I know your background and I know how you were raised and supported. And so you naturally came into this role that you have just makes sense, not having judgment and serving and supporting people. So when it comes to helping that other gentleman, right? His background was not your background.
No.
Not even close.
No.
Right? So needing to support him the way that you had that growing up, it makes sense that you have ended up in the position that you're in to be able to.
I'd like to think so. I mean, I've done a lot of things in this life occupationally. I tell people I'm a recovering geek, that I made it out of rehab and I still go to meetings every now and then, former chief science officer. But this is the art that I put into the world. This is the best work that I've ever done. When we're young, we make a big decision on who we're going to be. And we put ourselves in school and we work so hard only to find out through opportunity, through those trials of who we really are. And we either choose to have the courage to reinvent ourselves and endure the economic or whatever other hardships we're going to endure to do that. For better or for worse, I've done it. And this is my gift. I know it and I love it. And I suck at a lot of things. We can talk about those, but I don't think your audience would love that. Again, in answer to your question, you could put people through whatever process you want. Leaders are like a box of chocolates. You never really know which one you're going to get. And you have to know how to listen, be compassionate, and make them feel like they want to be in a better place and be a better leader.
So I'm thinking back to a few years ago when I was at a larger company. I was, so I'll just give you a quick backstory. So I started as a sales rep. Within like 6 months, ended up moving into, I took a job actually as an executive assistant, which felt like a very big step back to the CRO at the time. And so he said, I had actually applied for a different position and I was like a B sales rep. Like I'm not like the best salesperson there is. I'm okay, but I'm not the best. But I understand salespeople very well. So he just said, I need a thought partner. I actually don't need a secretary. I need a thought partner. And so he's like, I'll teach you everything about running a sales org. And I said, never going to happen. I don't want to do that. So, but I'll help you. Yeah, I'll help you. So actually what ended up happening is I ended up doing sales enablement. And then he asked me 4 different times to take over the direct sales floor. And I said, nope. And just watched him systematically fire all four leaders, boom, 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 boom. And every time I just said, no. And he's like, finally he said, I need you to do this. This is why I need you. Like, I need you to do this. I need you to bring something different. And so keeping in mind that all the managers then I took over probably had all been there before me. All of them were men. What we were having trouble with, we were having a lot of trouble. We were underperforming. It was a big organization. There was a lot of pressure. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know. I had read lots of leadership books. I had done lots of different things. And all I knew is that like this core group of people that were sitting in front of me we were not cohesive. There was a lot of infighting. When deals would go through, they'd be like, that was my guy's deal. I was dealing with so many lead disputes constantly that were coming my way. Where like, if I tell you, thanks for putting that deal in, Kendra, and actually you're not going to get credit for that. It would throw, just massive. And this was daily. So all I knew is I needed to get these managers on the same page. And we needed to be rooting for each other versus something else. And so I don't actually know. I just thought about something. I thought, what are all the characteristics that I want to draw out in this team? And so I had them all get together. I said, we're going to do our leadership team. We're going to do this once a week. We're going to spend an hour together. And I had this little tin bucket. And so I picked out a bunch of words and I did courage first. And I went online and I just typed in courage, quotes about courage. And I printed them out on paper, cut them up, put them all in this little bucket. And they all came in the room and they all had, here, this is the pipeline. This is what the deals look like. This is what, and so they're ready to go through it. And I said, what do you guys typically do in these meetings? They're like, we run through the pipeline. We start doing forecasting. I'm like, we're not doing any of that. And I said, everybody, pass this little bucket around, pick out a quote. And they're like, what the hell is she doing? And so it's all these quotes. And every single one had courage. Mm-hmm. And I said, I want you to tell me, does this quote resonate with you? Do you think it's bullshit? What is it? Like, and we're going to talk about it. And they were like, what? And I just said, just do it. Just like roll with me. I don't know. This might be stupid. Just do it. And so they started reading these quotes. And then one would read it and say, I actually believe in that's true. And here's why I think that. And the other one was like, no, I think it's, so we started talking. They started talking about courage. And then at the end of the meeting, it was about 45, 50 minutes in. And I said, okay. And they're like, okay, what? I'm like, we're done. And then we left. And the next time we came in, they're like, oh, she's got the bucket again. Like, what's in the bucket? What's in this little tin bucket? I mean, it was like something that was holding my like pens. I just dump my pens out and use that stupid bucket every time. Yeah. And the next one was, what was it? Belief. And so I said, like, these are all and that one was really interesting because it's like some of them were like had strong sense of like belief and faith and hope and all of these. And then other ones were like, no, it's like black and white. This is not a thing. So we had, and then they were like, and that's it. And I'm like, that's it. And then we left and the conversation started getting deeper and deeper. And then every week we just did another word. And that helped us understand a couple of things. Number one, we're more similar than we think. And even though the people around this table were very different in the way that they solve problems, we did curiosity, we did generosity, we did different words that had meaning that we were trying to draw out. And they were finally said, like probably after about 6 weeks, so it's like 6 times of doing this, what are we doing here? I'm like, what do you think we're doing here? And they were like, I mean, this is actually pretty cool. Like and you know what started happening? Less lead disputes. They started figuring it out between them. Then their team started figuring it out between them. And then the most interesting thing was about 3 months after that, I walked by one of their team meetings and they had the courage and they were talking about courage. And so what I started. Yeah,
but did they have a bucket?
They didn't have a bucket. They didn't have a bucket. They didn't have a bucket. But what I started seeing is like, there's no secret sauce. There's no secret sauce as far as how to do certain things. But what I understood is getting people that can look at each other. I have a very hard time being angry, frustrated, divisive when I actually know you. Mm-hmm. And so it's easier to be that way when I don't have an investment in you and don't know you. Mm-hmm. So if I force you to together, we're all going to talk. And I would call them out and be like, that is the dumbest answer to that question. That was so surface. The only thing you can't do in here is be surface. I want everybody to, and I will call you out on it. Do not be surface level.
To be vulnerable.
Here, we're going to talk. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to hear that, I know it just happened this morning. And I know you guys just had an argument this morning. Don't come in here and pretend it's okay. Mm-hmm. If we're talking about authenticity today, I want you to have the conversation. And so just saying like, that's never going to work. And that team was incredible. Like when I look back at that team, that was when the company was we had a run that was incredible. And we had less people. We're doing more revenue. We were getting stronger because the leadership team was getting stronger. And it really started with getting to know each other because it's harder for me in my spirit to be mean to you when I care. Yeah. So like, if I can try to make you care a little bit more about each other. And I remember this, like, it was like 6-7 months into it. They were like, so why is it that now you don't bring the bucket all the time? I'm like, okay, like we're doing different stuff now. But we were able to get into hard conversations after that because we had created a level of safety. Mm-hmm. That was first is like, can we trust each other? Can we walk out of this room with a decision that has to that we all are going to disagree on and then walk out and be all right, we're solid on this. And I'm going to look at you across the room. And even though you and I both disagreed, we're walking out of here with agreement that we are going to support it. I can say that if nothing else, I don't know a lot of things, but starting with creating safety by allowing people to see each other. And sometimes you have to help them see each other, and if you can't make somebody be vulnerable, but you can create the space to hold it for when we are.
Why can't I work with you?
Because it's,
I don't know.
I mean, come on.
I don't know.
She understands what she built was trust. She built trust. She helped the team learn how to trust each other.
It's important. I mean, so if for those that don't know, I'm trying to give like a tactical, here may be some places to start is, my good friend Amy Volas, she always says like people just want to be seen, heard, and understood.
Yeah.
So if you can create a place where you have fostered that, I can't make you see me. I can't make you see him or her. But I can create an environment that can be more conducive and create the space to be more conducive. Because that was an expensive meeting, if you think about it. I had 8 managers in a room with me. That's pretty expensive for an hour a week.
Pulling papers out of a bucket.
Pulling quotes out of a little tin bucket and talking about it.
But then fast forward, look at the change, look at the impact, look at the cohesion and the connectiveness of that group now from what started as a simple activity. But really, like you said, you gave them that space to be vulnerable. You can't force people into being vulnerable, but you can give them the opportunity and give them that space for sure.
I love that you said what you said, to know how to be seen. I mean, that's another leadership thing that I teach is most people don't have incredible clarity over how they wish to be seen. When you walk into a meeting, when you're in a boardroom, most people just walk in, and they get themselves ready and they're prepared and they walk in, but they don't have clarity in how they wish to be seen. And think about it. If you have, the power of intention, Dr. Wayne Dyer, if you have an intention to be seen a certain way and you walk in to that room with that intention, don't you think the chances of you being seen because of the intention that way are far greater than having no intention at all? So she was not only helping them to see each other, but I think a next step would be to make them have that clarity to know how do you want to be seen, right? And you have that power to do that, and so I mean I might steal that exercise from you. That's a beautiful exercise.
We'll absolutely be stealing this because it starts with just those conversations and what you're saying about being seen, right? Same thing when it comes to a big part of culture is employee recognition and employee appreciation, right? But kind of goes along with the being seen thing. How do they want that appreciation? Some people want you to announce them in the middle of a meeting and say, hoorah to so-and-so, they did the sales, blah, blah, blah. There might be somebody else who doesn't want that, but they want a little note on their desk, right? So you're learning these things by having those conversations. And then Christine, like you said, you're getting to know them as people. You have to know them as people and know what sparks them, what's their passion, what are they going to debate on in that conversation when they pull that quote out of the bucket, right? Then it allows that connection. And then, like you said, then it's harder to be mad and argue if you understand where that person's coming from.
And if everybody communicates, one of the things that I work with is I help people find that clarity in how they, even teams, how do you want to be seen? And then communicate that.
Yeah.
So now there's others like that can openly keep you accountable to your truest intentions, and everybody can be more authentic that way. But I like the bucket idea. I'm going to go out and get a bucket after this.
A little tin bucket. Along with that, Kendra, so, I'm sure most of us are familiar with the 5 love languages. Well, the work version of it is called Languages of Appreciation. And so it's all of those same things minus touch, right? And so that is something like I have every new team member do that. so that I understand how they want to be recognized or in its fat and the way. So someone might have words of affirmation as it, but how is very different. One of my employees, she's like, oh, I want you to put it on LinkedIn. Like, I want everybody to know it. Like, whenever it's something like that. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. Good to know.
Yeah.
Versus, I have one employee, she's like, I would absolutely die if you did that. Like, a sticky note on my desk would work.
Yeah.
Like, just thanks so much. Like, so words of appreciation and how I want that expressed is not the same. Not the same at all. And so making sure acts of service, you do something for me to help me out, that how really matters.
Yep.
So like I always ask that. And then I always ask about what's the pet peeve around it. Tell me how this has gone sideways for you. And one of my good friends, Heather, she does not like public recognition. And one of her worst moments was when somebody was trying to do something nice for her, actually had like a singing telegram and come to the office and do this big singing thing at the office for her birthday. And she was like trying to put on a happy face, but I could tell she was just about to just die. She wanted to melt into the floor, and it was like, the person that did it for her was like, this is so wonderful. I'm like, are you okay? Are you okay? I caught her and she literally needed a minute. Like, it was so awful for her. And she was like, the thought was so beautiful. And also this was one of my most like horrifyingly embarrassing moments.
Yeah.
For her in her like entire career. And so how that is expressed, I think really matters. So that's a really great exercise. It's one of the things that like every single time I hire anybody in any role, I have them do the languages of appreciation. Just let me know kind of guidance on how it feels for you.
Yep.
And then know if there's things that change around that, or you have extra insights after that would be good for us to know too, like to circle back up on them.
Absolutely. And it's nice that they have it for kind of that work setting as well, because I'm essentially the same person all the time.
Yeah.
But for me personally, there's tweaks. Like if I'm at home, I'm absolutely the acts of service. If you unload the dishwasher, man, you are my best friend now because I didn't have to do that.
That's
right. At work, I don't need you to unload the dishwasher. You're obviously that same person, but the way that you interact and the way that you have that appreciation. And like her example, the person that did that for her probably would have loved that done for them.
Well, and she's a words person. So that felt like that's exactly right. And it was like, just give her a card.
Yeah.
A like handwritten, loving card with specificity. So that's actually what she doesn't like. Like, I really appreciated that you did that. She likes specificity. What I really loved about that party that you threw was the way that you brought this in, or the little beautiful cupcakes that you had handmade with those things. Like, you give her specific details. She knows you didn't miss it. That means something to her. That singing telegram was like worst day ever.
That just reminded me. I don't know if you've ever watched Ted Lasso. And that's basically a show on leadership.
Yeah.
And he had a very quirky way of doing it, but he would bake these biscuits. You remember? And he'd bring it to her every morning. Every single morning. So it just, what you said made me think of Ted Lasso, because that meant the world to her. She loved it.
Yeah. She didn't know she was going to love it.
Right. She didn't know, but she did.
Yeah.
And she looked forward to it.
Yep. So understanding those little pieces. And again, it goes back to the connecting with your team, having those conversations. If as a leader, you're not even taking the time to have those conversations, to make those connections, to me, as a takeaway from this conversation, right? That's the root level. That's the bottom level, is having those connected conversations, understanding and connecting with your people. Because if you're not having those meetings, pulling things out of a bucket, right? To allow the opportunity to talk in that safe space.
Yeah.
You're not going to learn about people. You're not going to understand them as an individual. And so a lot of what we talked about today really comes down to the root of understanding and getting to know, and then supporting.
It's the one soul at a time
Yeah.
conversation we're having.
Yeah.
Authentic conversations. And I believe further, you not only need to have those authentic conversations as a group, but you need to have them individually.
Yeah.
And because
absolutely.
people need that one-on-one growth time. And you have to have a commitment to both. That's why I find that lots of companies and organizations are hiring coaches internally for their teams, both individually and teams as well, to have those authentic conversations.
Yep. And to make sure they happen the right way. Yeah. So we are approaching that time. I know.
No.
I know. I hate this. See, Daryl, I told you we could do 3 hours. So with the last few moments, we have really talked about a lot of nice takeaways. And that's one of the things that I love about these conversations is, yes, it's a full hour, but there's so much quality information and things that people can take away from the conversation too. A lot of our listeners, our audience that's listening is kind of in that age of 30s. I think a lot of it is probably some folks that are growing into those leadership roles.
Yeah.
And so they're listening for those takeaways and those opportunities to listen to what can I do to be a better leader? And I think a lot of that came out in this conversation for sure. We could do this all week long. But is there anything else with the last few moments, if you had to give advice to a leader, along with all the things we've talked about today with, allowing space to be open and vulnerable, allowing, leaders to be humans and make mistakes and all of these other things. Is there anything else that you would add into the conversation for that individual that's listening, that's trying to grow and become that great leader in order to support the company culture?
Well, I mean, like Andy Dufresne said in the Shawshank Redemption, get busy living or get busy dying, right? I kind of massage that a little bit. Get busy growing. CEOs, presidents love people that are curious because people that are curious are always expanding. And people that are not curious are not expanding as much. You have to be just as curious. You have to make a commitment to yourself. And that commitment, I believe, needs to be, you spend money. Now you've got a commitment, right? Now I'm committed because I'm spending money. I am investing in myself and in my organization. And everybody at my organization can see it, that I'm investing in myself and I'm investing in others. So, I mean, that would be, to me, the greatest tip I could give anybody is prove to yourself and prove to your others and how you're investing in yourself and in your company.
I like that.
Okay, so my advice would be this. So whenever I think about spending time or doing a meeting or doing a one-on-one or having really anything, I believe you need to take a minute to be very intentional about what you've hired that meeting to do. So I'm going to give really tactical advice. This has probably been super helpful for me in my career to be able to say this meeting, I have hired this meeting for the outcome to be nothing other than we're all a little bit closer after. So I go in with some intention around what it's supposed to do, what it's supposed to be, what I've hired this email to do, what I've hired this, I look at it that way. One of my good friends, Matt Mahoney, was like, what did we hire this to do? I'm like, oh yes. So I think about, and I take a minute. When I don't, I can tell. When I don't take that 30 seconds before to think about what I want this to do. And then I do, whatever it is we're going to do, we're doing the planning, we're doing this. And then I leave some space for some magic. And I think that, even with the example of the buckets, I didn't know what quote they were going to pick out.
Yeah.
But when they'd be like, this is stupid, I'm like, that one's for you. You picked it. There's some magic in there. I don't know which one you're going to pick, but you know what? You know why you're holding that one in your hand? Because that was the one for you today. You know why it's irritating to you? Because it was the one for you. So So I think it's all about I'm such a type A personality. It's about planning. It's about understanding. And then it's also about leaving a little space for something in there that I don't actually understand and being just fine with it. And finding the beauty in it and how uncomfortable it is, but also saying wow, I didn't know that was going to happen. And you know what? this is crazy and this is good and we're just going to lean in because we didn't know what we were doing. You know, we didn't know that this was going to happen, but there's just a little space for some sparkly in there. So I think about it like that.
I like that. Leave space for the sparkly.
A little bit. Everybody's going to be like, oh God, she's so foo-foo. But you know what? Look, it is.
It works.
Well, whether you want to believe it or not, it's there.
Yeah.
So you just got to.
That is my guiding light and
right.
principle.
That's right. It's there.
I say when I coach people, I always leave space to be present for the magic to happen as it should, rather than me trying to force things.
Yep.
It's always a balance between force and the process and allowing, guiding and allowing. And that's the delicate balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay. So then the last thing is if you have any last comments about your company, any quick point you wanted to make, and then how folks can reach you. Christine, I'll start with you.
I think that we've done lots of talking. So I think people will understand who I am and who we are and what we believe, hopefully from this conversation. So probably the best way to reach me would be LinkedIn if we want to connect that way. Christine Rogers, like LinkedIn, or Christine at Aspireship.com. I'm like happy to take this conversation further with anybody that has more questions, like however I can be helpful.
Awesome.
I would say the same. I have actually a very big LinkedIn presence. I have 29,000 connections. Jeez. I have lots of followers of my newsletter. I write a lot about culture and leadership. I encourage people to, and there's lots of tools in there and stories in there and tips in there. I encourage people to dive in. My name is Andrew Kolikoff. It's spelled Kolikoff, 2 F's like Frank. You can connect with me there. Or, of course, you could always reach me at Andrew at Aurelius, like Marcus Aurelius, AureliusTransformation.com.
Awesome. And I'm glad you said that about the stuff that you post, because I would say that about both of you. Both of you are very good leaders to follow just for those tips and notes on what's happening and culture and leadership. So both of you are very good leaders to follow. So
thank you.
Yeah. So on that note, my least favorite part is to end, but thank you both of you for an amazing and fluid and authentic conversation based around culture and leadership and how we can make this better. And honestly, that is why I started this podcast and why this company is growing into something bigger than I could have never imagined, because it is a company that is based around the culture improvement space and the resources that go along with it. So highlighting companies that are doing well and then supporting companies that allow that growth for others. Our purpose here is to improve company culture so people want to go to work. Employees and leaders should like where they work, and we think that is possible. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Culture Crush, the only podcast out there that does a deep dive of companies that are crushing it with a great company culture. If you think your company has a strong culture that should be highlighted, please reach out to Kendra Maples on LinkedIn or email us at culturecrushpodcast@gmail.com.